All right, today we are diving deep into two powerful, and I mean powerfully conflicting, ideas about racial progress in America. On one hand, you've got a story all about incentives and culture, and on the other, a completely different argument about historical debt and systemic harm. Let's get into it.
So, here's the big question at the heart of all this. Decades after the civil rights movement, why are there still these huge gaps in income, in wealth, in education? I mean, in some cases, things seem to be getting worse, not better. What is going on?
Well, to try and answer that, two major schools of thought have really taken shape. And you have to understand, they aren't just quibbling over the details here. They are coming from completely different planets when it comes to the root cause of the problem and, of course, the solution.
Okay, so let's jump into the first perspective. This one is heavily based on the work of the economist Thomas Sowell, and we can pretty much call it the incentives narrative.
So, according to this narrative, the main reasons for the disparities we see today, well, they aren't necessarily about ongoing racism. Instead, the focus is on a mix of other things: the unexpected and often negative consequences of government policies, the collapse of the two-parent family structure, and a serious drop in the quality of education.
Now, to back this up, Sowell points to something that might seem really counterintuitive. He argues that between 1900 and 1960, Black Americans made incredible economic and social leaps forward, and they did this while facing way more blatant legal racism. For him, this is the proof in the pudding. Internal strengths, like strong families and a focus on skills, can create progress even when the world outside is incredibly hostile.
And this quote, it really boils the whole moral argument down to its core. Good intentions are nice, but results are what matter. If a policy, whether it's about welfare or affirmative action, creates incentives that lead to bad outcomes, then from this point of view, it's a failure, period.
Okay, so that's one side of the coin. Now, let's flip it over and look at a completely different argument. This is the perspective of the Foundational Black Americans, or FBA, movement. This group is specifically defined as the descendants of people enslaved right here in the United States, and we can call their view the historical debt narrative. For the FBA narrative, it's all about one thing: an unpaid debt. The idea is that the gaps we see today are the direct, lingering result of centuries of oppression. This isn't about something that happened in the 1960s. This is about a debt that started racking up in the 1600s and has never, ever been settled. You can think of their view of history as this long, unbroken chain of harm. First, slavery creates this massive initial debt. Then you have the failure of Reconstruction, which stops any real repair from happening right after the Civil War. After that, Jim Crow laws come in and basically lock in all that disadvantage. So from this perspective, today is just the latest chapter in a very long story of damage that's never been fixed.
And the moral argument here? It's the complete opposite of what we just heard. It basically says that talking about incentives or behavior is just a distraction until justice is done. The main event, the only thing that really matters first, is repair and restitution for all that historical damage. Without that, everything else just sounds like blaming the victim.
Okay, so we've laid out the two sides. Now let's put them in the ring together and see where they really truly collide. Because they look at the exact same facts and somehow come to wildly different conclusions.
The biggest, most fundamental clash is right here. What's the role of racism today? The Sowell perspective would say, yeah, it exists, but it's not the main thing driving outcomes anymore. But the FBA perspective says, no, you're missing the point. It is the central organizing principle of society, and it is absolutely still the decisive factor.
So both sides look at that same period after the Civil Rights Movement, a time when a lot of social indicators took a nosedive, but they point the finger at completely different villains. The incentives narrative blames well-intentioned government aid, arguing it accidentally discouraged work and marriage. But the historical debt narrative points right back at the government, saying you passed some laws, sure, but you failed to make the huge economic investment that was needed to actually fix the damage.
And what about a policy like affirmative action? Well, you guessed it, they're worlds apart. The Sowell argument says it's actually counterproductive, that it puts people in situations where they're set up to fail, and it attaches a stigma to their achievements. The FBA argument, on the other hand, sees it as a tiny but absolutely necessary tool to start correcting for centuries of being deliberately locked out of those exact same places.
So when it comes to the path forward, this is where it gets crystal clear. Their proposed solutions are basically mirror images of each other. One path looks inward, focusing on rebuilding culture, getting skills, and competing in the marketplace. The other path looks outward, focusing on using political pressure to demand compensation and recognition from the state.
So you have to wonder, right? If both sides are looking at the same history, why is there zero common ground? Well, this gets to the real heart of why these two views are just so incompatible.
Because here's the twist. The conflict is way deeper than just facts and figures. It turns out they're not just giving us different answers, they're actually asking two completely different questions right from the start.
See, Sowell's entire way of thinking is designed to answer a practical, forward-looking question. What actually works? What combination of culture, policy, and economics leads to prosperity for any group anywhere in the world? It's a universal question.
But the FBA narrative, it's not asking that at all. It's asking a justice question, a question of accounting for the past. It's not universal. It's incredibly specific. It's about what is owed, by whom, to whom, for harms done.
And of course, when you start with two totally different questions, you're going to end up with two totally different endgames. One side is trying to build a machine for future prosperity, the other is trying to win a court case for past damages.
And this is why these two worldviews can't just peacefully coexist. From the FBA perspective, Sowell's focus on policy mistakes in the 1960s isn't just a disagreement, it's a direct threat. It tries to reframe the entire conversation away from a massive historical debt rooted in slavery and moves it toward a debate about practical reforms today. And in doing that, it basically pulls the rug out from under the FBA's core moral and political argument for reparations.
Which leaves us with this final, really challenging thought. Maybe the biggest thing holding back progress isn't that we can't find the right answers. Maybe it's that we haven't even agreed on what question we're trying to ask in the first place.